freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 223.
Are you sure that's 223 or not 556?
I'm pretty sure it's 223.
Okay.
Of course, we're talking ammo calibers here on Gun Freedom Radio, where we engage, we educate, and we inform. We are brought to you by azfirearms.com, your nationwide hometown gun shop. I am one of your hosts, Cheryl Todd.
And I'm the other guy, Dan Todd. Our theme of the show today is the Illustrated History of Firearms. And our guest today is Jim Supica.
Jim recently retired as director of the NRA Museums Division, where he co-authored the just-released Illustrated History of Firearms second edition with NRA Museum senior curators Phil Schreier. I butchered that, didn't I? And
Phil.
The first edition of this book is sitting on the shelf behind me and was the best-selling firearms book of all time. And I'm sure this one will be in that category as well. Welcome to the show, Jim.
It's so good to see you guys again. I love what you do, and it's always a fun time to get to be with you a little bit.
Well, Jim, I love what you do too, but you just got me in some trouble now. I've been looking at the book, and I try to use your book as an inventory sheet of what I want.
Yeah, good luck.
And I'm thumbing through this book. I thought I knew everything there was to know about guns. Enough, right, to get me in trouble.
Yeah.
And I was born in 1955, and in 1955, Winchester made a hunting rifle, with a transistor radio in the stock.
Is that
I gotta
real?
Have that.
Is that for what page is
that on? They
made
one of them. So
okay.
You're going to have to wrestle Doug Wicklund and Phil Schreier to get it away from the museum, because I don't think they're going to let go of it easy.
Wow. I thought I knew everything. How did you get started in all this?
Well, way too many Westerns as a kid. We're of a similar age, so you can probably relate, but way too many Westerns. I had a weapons box instead of a toy box with Mattel Fanner 50s and all the kid guns that you have. I didn't get my first real gun until I was 21, but I always kept the interest in them, and I started collecting. And it just grew from there. Eventually, I tried to go into the business of selling antique and collectible firearms. That's always a bad idea to go into your hobby as a business, but we made it work for about 17 years. Old Town Station and ArmchairGunShow.com and ArmsBid.com and Colin Supica Firearms Auction. And that went well for us. I started writing about guns, books and articles. And about 12 years ago, NRA contacted me and asked if I would be interested in being the director of their museums. And that is the only job in the world that I would rather do over what I was already doing. I love my work with my little antique gun business. But, and I did, first of all, at first I said, we can't do it. We're based in Kansas. Our family's here. We just can't move. I talked to Eve about it, and she said, look, that's your dream job. We'll make it work. So thanks to her, we packed up, we leased out our house. We moved to the DC area, and I spent 12 great years with that remarkable team that we've got there at the NRA Museums.
You did a beautiful job with that too. We got to tour the museum once. What a beautiful place to go.
We got the tour
with
Mr. Jim Supica. It was amazing. And our granddaughter, I think she was probably 4 at the time, She still talks about that. I mean, that
Well, that
made
was a lot of fun. That was
oh
big
man,
fun.
was it ever? Was it
Yeah.
ever?
So, and this little auction house that you had,
Yeah.
that was before the time of internet and all that, right? And you did mail order?
Yeah, we were just, I ran a mail order catalog. I loved doing the print catalog because I had a policy that I wouldn't sell a gun until after it had been published in the catalog, so my subscribers would get first shot at it. But what it really meant was I loved buying them and I hated selling them. I just hated letting every gun I sold go. And so
I
I
don't
put
know
it in the
anybody
mail
like
order catalog. Yeah, yeah. He understands. He
Mhm.
Oh,
understands.
totally.
But really enjoyed doing that. Had a great time. Liked making the catalog. It went over well. So yeah, it was a lot of work and it was fun work.
Right. It is fun. You look at this whole book. I mean, you've got guns just for fun. You've got
Yep.
movie guns.
Yeah.
A lot of history talking about all the wars and the times throughout the
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
Firearms. It's
Well,
amazing.
that is the fourth major book that the NRA museums have put out since I started there. And to me, it's far and away the best. It combines the very best of the first three books. There's some couple huge collections that came in recently, and the prime pieces from those two collections are in this book. They haven't been in the previous books. I like the layout. We tried to put more faces with guns. Where there's a history with a gun, those are always my favorite guns. So if it had belonged to someone, we tried to be sure and get that information there. We've got guns in there from presidents and kings and generals and Medal of Honor recipients and law enforcement officers and outlaws and Old West lawmen and exhibition shooters like Annie Oakley, and just a lot. And guns in there that people just have in their closets at home too. And that's a fun part of our museums, is seeing people go through and pointing at a gun and saying Uncle Earl's got one like that, or yeah, that's what Dad carried when he was on the force. So that's a big thing too. The guns that just have belonged to Americans, had a lot of use. Those are important artifacts for those museums too.
They sure are. And what I always find fun is the oddities, the stuff where they've taken two things that really shouldn't. It's kind of like the Reese's peanut butter cup type firearms, right?
Yeah.
It's like chocolate and peanut butter.
Yeah.
Oh, they go good together.
Yeah,
some of them don't quite go good together.
Exactly. The Reese's peanut butter thing works out, but most of these are just terrible ideas, but they're fascinating and they're fun. And I bet you're right at one of the pages there that has them on it.
I'm on page 52, and there's one it's a knife, but it's a gun, but it's a gun, but it's a knife,
Yeah.
And so, I mean, some of these are impractical, but in the process, in the history of guns, developing and morphing and changing, and the technology, it shows us that people are willing to think out of the box, and it's not just like, well, a gun is a gun and it always was a gun and that's all it's ever going to be. So I really enjoy the creativity here.
Yeah. You look at a Colt Patterson revolver and it looks really weird to us, but it was Samuel Colt's first revolver. And until he invented them, nobody knew what a revolver should look like. So it's interesting to see that evolution. Same way with a broom handle semi-auto pistol. Nobody knew what a semi-auto pistol should look like. It looks odd and old-fashioned to us. It looks a little futuristic. They base some Star Wars blasters on it too, but it's just fun to see those old designs and watch them evolve. And like you say, the terrible ideas are some of the most interesting, if a little bit horrifying.
Give me a terrible idea. Tell me one.
She was turned to a page there that has one of the worst ideas on it ever. A cemetery gun. And it turns out that in England in the early 1800s, the way you trained doctors was at autopsy theaters. And they would get a fresh cadaver, and the doctors in training would open it up and examine it and figure out how it worked. And wealthy people could buy tickets to go to these autopsy theaters and watch the process. And the only cadaver that they could legally work on was an executed criminal, and they ran out of executed criminals pretty fast. So an entire new career field opened up of resurrectionists, grave robbers. And they would find a fresh grave in the cemetery, dig it up, haul the corpse down to the autopsy theater, sell it to the autopsy theater, and make a quick buck. Well, this was not popular with the cemeteries. They started building fences, they started hiring guns, and some enterprising person came up with the idea of renting the family of the dear departed a cemetery gun. Now, this was a flintlock mounted in a big oval of wood, just a short, about 18-inch long, flared muzzle like a blunderbuss with a big old flintlock sitting on it. And it was mounted in a stake that went into the ground, and then it had 3 rings attached to the trigger. And you would stretch wires out. There it is, right there.
This guy, I don't know if you can see it very well, but yeah.
Yeah. You'd stretch wires out from those 3 rings and put them to stakes in the ground. I'm going to look real quick here myself.
52.
52, thank you. Yep.
There it
is.
That's it.
That's your cemetery gun. And then your grave robber would come along and trip over one of those. The gun would swivel towards the grave robber and fire.
Oh my
And
gosh.
this was a fairly effective disincentive to dig up fresh cadavers. But as with so many trap guns, the horror of the concept eventually came up with the, hey, this is a good idea. And they weren't used long, but you see that concept repeated, and there are other guns in there like that. Trap guns, spring guns, set guns. They're set to go off with nobody attending them. It's like a single shot landmine in a certain way, but you see them used for animal traps, for controlling varmints or harvesting furs. You see them used as supposedly burglar alarms, but they could be loaded with lethal loads as well. And of course, the late 19th, early 20th century, there are a handful of lawsuits over people who did this and came to grief either in the criminal or civil justice system over having set these really bad ideas up.
Well, it's indiscriminate, and so are you a grave robber, or are you going to visit your departed's grave and you trip over this wire? I mean, it's just,
I'd hate to be a landscaper for that period of time.
Are you sure you disconnected them all? Yeah.
And then just recently, I would say within the last 2 years, I read an article where a gentleman set up traps in his own home and ended up killing himself because
it's amazing that this bad idea still gets revisited, but it does happen.
So in that evolution of firearms and the idea that technology is constantly morphing and changing and growing, people have gotten this idea in their mind that now I'm going to say a scary word right now. Ready? AR-15. Are we all still okay? Do we need a safe space?
I think
we're all right.
I think mine just moved. My AR-15 just moved when you said that.
Yeah.
So the AR-15 platform, right? The scary black guns of today. There are so many people out there that have become fond of nodding their head mindlessly and repeating this phrase that, well, the founders would have never even imagined something like this. And all they had was flintlocks. And so clearly when the Second Amendment was written, it wasn't for this gun. But wait, Jim knows about a gun that was very similar in functionality from which century, Jim? Do you remember?
It's a 16 shooter from the 16th century.
16th century.
16 shooter.
And a 16 shooter. So I'm pretty sure our founding fathers would have had some concept, right?
Indeed they did. And not only was it high capacity, it was fully automatic.
Oh my goodness. Yeah,
So
we're going to have to pause and let everybody go and calculate come back, because you just said high capacity magazine and you just said full auto. So anyway, take a breath and now we're back.
It's a beautiful gun. It's at our museum in Springfield, Missouri, which we should talk about a little bit too at some point. But it's a wheel lock and a match lock and another wheel lock all built into one. And the way it worked was with superposed loads, which means you were stacking loads in this muzzle loader, stacking 16 loads in the same barrel. So you loaded powder ball, powder ball, powder ball 16 times. You had them all stacked in this barrel. And then there were several different ways that you could set it up to operate. It had a total of 3 locks. It had 2 wheel locks and a match lock at the rear as a backup. And you could set it just completely full auto. You could set it to where you pull the trigger once and you fire all 16 rounds in sequence like a Roman candle, just one after the other. Now, the way it works is they used a lead bullet, an oval lead bullet, with a hole drilled through the lengthwise axis of the lead ball, and that was filled with fusing. So the first round fired, the bullet went out the barrel, the fusing burned through to the powder charge behind the second one, and then it went. So you pull the trigger, they're all going to go. You're not going to stop it by releasing the trigger or anything else. Now, using multiple locks, they could load it to where it would first fire 9 and then fire 6, or first fire 9 and then fire 5, and still have 1 round in reserve for the match lock. But it's a beautifully made gun. It's highly decorated. Not a military gun. It was made for royalty, I'm sure. And whether this gun has ever been fired, I don't know. But it is remarkable. And you mentioned the founding fathers. One thing that the people who argue muzzle loading flintlocks need to realize is that the Continental Congress placed an order for 100 8-shot flintlock muskets that used this same basic principle called the Belton flintlock musket. And it was the same principle, stacking 8 rounds in one barrel. Now, there are no surviving examples, so nobody knows exactly how it worked, but there is correspondence between Ben Franklin and Thomas Jefferson and other founding fathers, and there's the resolution that they passed authorizing the purchase of 100 of these high-capacity flintlocks. So yeah, they had an idea that you could fire more than 1 shot before spending 30 seconds reloading your muzzle loader.
Jim, do you think that maybe there's one of these guns somewhere hidden somewhere?
I hope there is. I would love to see one.
Wouldn't
it should
awesome?
Definitely go to the NRA Museums if it's out there.
Yes.
But yeah, I'd love to just even see one. I keep hoping one will show up, and you never know.
You know, people don't realize that don't like firearms. They don't realize how much work goes into these guns. It's a fine art. I mean, everything's precision and very well made.
And the era we're talking about, I mean, there weren't big gun makers. There were individual gunsmiths. These were guys who'd take a hunk of iron and a hunk of wood and make a gun out of them. So it was a very, very high skilled process. Time the wheel lock was invented, it and clocks were the most mechanically complex devices that humans were building at the time. A lot of people think the wheel lock was designed by Leonardo da Vinci, and it itself was a huge advance in firearms. It was the first truly concealable firearm, because before that you had to carry something burning to set off your powder charge. Matchlock relied on a burning piece of cord to ignite the powder charge. The wheel lock could be carried loaded, primed, and wound up and ready to fire, and completely concealed. And this concept also led to the very first firearms bans. There were a number of principalities in Europe and that banned wheel locks because they were concealable. And to the royalty at the time, it seemed like a terrible idea that someone could come into their presence with a loaded, ready-to-shoot firearm tucked under their tunic.
Well, the royalty in the United States feels the same way today, right?
Yeah, they kind of do, don't they?
Yeah.
Kind
Yeah.
of do.
A wonderful point.
Oh man, that is so amazing, and the whole idea of having to have that burning cord in order to operate your firearms. And what do you do in wind? What do you do in rain?
Exactly.
It just is mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
But what is it? Necessity is the mother of invention. So
Yeah. Yeah,
if they
exactly.
didn't struggle with that, then maybe that's what we would still all be carrying around.
I have to ask Jim off script here. What's your favorite? Do you have a favorite gun?
Ooh.
I have a couple of favorite guns. Two of them are in the museum. One of them is that 16-shot wheel lock we just talked about. It's on loan from Joe Wanamaker, who runs the Tulsa Arms Show, world's biggest gun show. Wonderful event, and we should talk about gun shows in general sometime. But the other one is a gun that happens to be my all-time favorite model of handgun that belonged to my boyhood hero, and that is a Smith & Wesson new model number 3 that belonged to Theodore Roosevelt. So those are probably my two favorite guns in the museum.
That's so cool.
And you have a collection too, right?
I got a couple guns.
Yeah, and you like, from what I remember, right, you like serial number 1 guns, right?
I do. The advice everybody gives collectors is, oh, you've got to specialize. And man, I like too much different stuff to specialize. I wanted basically one of everything. Couldn't afford one of everything, but that's what I wanted. I'm like you were when you looked at the book. I want one of each of those.
Right.
But with serial number 1 guns, there's always at least one gun out there that qualifies for the collection. So I got started on those, and I've picked up quite a few over the years.
Right.
That is so fun. And then our granddaughter sent you a serial number 1 water pistol.
Yeah, she did. And it's in I should have got it out. It's in my safe with my other serial number 1s. It's right in there, and it's a wonderful serial number 1 water pistol, the only serial number 1 water pistol in my collection. So
maybe in existence.
Maybe.
One of the guns,
red one.
One of the guns I was always fascinated with, but I'm almost 90% sure they're fantasy guns, is the vampire kit that came out.
Yeah.
I love those things, but I don't think it's real. I don't think there ever was really a real one. Do you know?
There was, gosh, I wish I could remember the source. There was a great academic, well-researched article done on that. And kind of where those vampire killer kits go is they were probably mostly assembled in the 1960s, 1970s, but they have their own collector market now. They're 50, 60 years old now, and it's a concept that was big at the time, and I don't think any of them were actually made from the era that they represent themselves as being from, but they're still very fun, very cool, and they're a fantasy thing. Actually, I think the favorite gun at the NRA National Firearms Museum for visitors is a Vampire Hunter kit. It's a more modern gun. It's a Colt Detective Special, beautifully engraved by Frank Alini, who's just a wonderful Colt master engraver. But it's got a cross engraved on the muzzle. It's got vampire bats hanging upside down in the cylinder flutes. It's got little silver inlaid bats on the grips for, I assume, the vampires that they've killed, and it's cased in a little mahogany coffin. And the guys there, when they're giving a tour, they use it to illustrate firearm safety rules. You're always supposed to be sure of your target before you shoot. So there's a mirror inside the lid so you can check and be sure it's a vampire that you're shooting at. And you should always be sure that your gun is unloaded while you're cleaning it. So there is a wooden stake that attaches to the cleaning rod. So if you're attacked while you're cleaning your vampire killer Detective Special, you'd still be able to defend yourself with the wood stake.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's cool.
So fun. I love it. So talking about two things, trends in collecting firearms, what do you think drives trends? Is it like the latest gun in a Hollywood, blockbuster, or what do you think drives that? And what are some interesting guns that you think that are actually underappreciated and under-collected?
Those are great questions, and they're very relevant to a project I'm tackling right now. I'm just hired on as editor for Standard Catalog of Firearms, which is one of the major price guides on firearms. So I'm going through there and trying to look at these 1,700 pages of firearms values and say, does this reflect the current market? And I've tapped a bunch of folks who really know their stuff to help me out on it. So I'm getting some really interesting opinions in from a bunch of experts in the field. I've surveyed these guys asking about specific types of guns, and the feedback I'm getting back, it's not unanimous, but there are consistent trends. The antique firearms, the stuff that was popular when I started collecting, the cowboy guns, percussion revolvers, early antique cartridge revolvers, Winchester lever actions, Kentucky rifles. That field is a little bit weakening, which I think it's the aging of that collector group. They've been hoarding them for 40 years, and they or their estates are slowly letting their collections go. So the values aren't really going down hard in those, but they're going down. They're kind of staying steady. So if that's a field that you have an interest in, it's not a bad time to start buying. There are relatively affordable guns. One thing that you see with firearms collecting is various fields tend to price themselves out of the market. It happened early on with percussion Colts and Kentucky rifles. It came to where just a few very affluent collectors could afford to buy them, and then you saw it come along with the single action armies. And I got into Smith & Wesson Model 3s, which were a contemporary of the single action army, but didn't get used in the Westerns because they were affordable when I started collecting them, but they started pushing their market up. What the guys are telling me right now is that the fields where you're seeing strong sales, the first two I'm going to mention are not related to collecting, but they're related to firearms purchasing. And those are the so-called modern sporting rifles, the AR patterns, the AK patterns, basically semi-automatics with detachable box magazines and synthetic stocks that have a cosmetic similarity to military guns. One thing, we talked about that a little bit, but one thing folks have to realize there, that advances in civilian arms have always been picked up by military arms, and advances in military arms have always been picked up by civilian arms. So what you're seeing is some of these great ideas that kind of originated with the AR-15, such as the synthetic stock, the straight line configuration, the detachable box magazine. These are good ideas for firearms, and that's why they're adopted into the civilian market as well. And that's always been the case. But those types of guns are very popular. Also, the modern semi-automatic handguns, the synthetic frames that started pretty much with the Glock. They weren't the absolute first, but they were the first to be wildly popular. Those are great sellers now. And they've been huge sellers, particularly with the weird year that 2020 has been. A lot of first-time gun owners out there. Two things to say for them: good for you, and get training.
Yes.
Get safety training, get shooting training. NRA has a great program of certified instructors, and you owe it to yourself, your family, and the people around you to get trained in the firearms that you bought. Among collectible firearms, the areas that guys tell me are kind of increasing are the older military arms, the early and mid 20th century military arms. Those are coming on strong. The classic military semi-automatic pistols, and of course there the 1911 leads the pack, but you also see the Lugers, the broom handles, the P38s, those type of guns as being strong in the market right now.
Well, Jim, you remember, I mean, when we were kids, we used to go to the pawn shop, and they'd have 1911s for like $14, $15, and
Yeah.
M1 carbines for $20. And so me at that age, I couldn't afford to buy those guns. And now that I'm at the age where I can afford to buy them, I buy them up, but they're not $14 anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that as collectors go, I mean, whatever you were brought up with when you were kids is going to be what you're looking for. Like a Glock first generation gun.
Yeah.
To me, when they were around, I didn't like them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But people are collecting those now, getting them in the original box with that 2-piece box and things like that. So I think what we want, what we had when we were kids, or what we saw in a movie, these kind of things.
Yeah, it's a great point. Like you say, Westerns aren't popular anymore. How often do you see a Western? Every other year, and people don't care about those. But the guns that they see in the movie, the guns that they grow up with, that's something that's popular. I also think to me, there seems to be a trend for what were the guns a century ago. And so you're seeing interest in military bolt action rifles, very early semi-automatics. I think you saw that with my generation with cowboy guns, and with the earlier generation with Kentucky rifles and percussion pistols. So
right. I still think guns are a very, very good investment, no matter what type of guns they were from the past. There's collectors for them. You're right. They're not as strong on the Kentucky rifles as they were back, when we were kids. But I think overall firearms are a very good investment.
The saying in gun collecting used to be, you can't pay too much, you just pay too soon. Now, I don't know that that's still the case, but the way I've seen firearms value trends in general is that there's not a lot of the up and down and up and down and up and down. You take a little hit when you buy a new gun and shoot it. It's no longer new in box, it's used. So you take a little bite there. But at worst, firearms values tend to be steady, and generally, more often than not, they just kind of rise steadily and strong and never go down. One thing we haven't mentioned in firearm values is political influences. When you have a strong pro-gun administration and Congress come in, values get soft. When you have an anti-gun president, an anti-gun legislature, people buy now because they're afraid they're not going to be able to buy next year. So you'll see a change in the firearms market depending on the turnout in the November elections.
Right, but I also see that there's a lot of people that were not for guns that are buying guns right now because of COVID and political reasons. And I think we're going to see it could be good, because once, you and I know, once you buy a gun and shoot it, you got to have 2 guns, right? And then you got to have 3.
That's right.
And then you got to convince your wife to like guns, because if she likes guns, you can buy as many as you can afford to buy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but I am seeing a difference. There's people that didn't realize that all the trouble you have to go through to buy a gun.
Yeah.
Now they're going through that, and they're the ones that voted for this stuff.
Yeah.
And they're going, oh, I don't want that anymore. And so I think it's going to be a different world at the end of this year, I think.
Yeah. I hope you're right, and that certainly makes sense to me that people would be influenced this way. I got to tell you, when I married Eve 40 years ago, our first Christmas together, I gave her an RG-38 revolver that I paid $25 for, and she is still married to me. So God bless her.
The question is,
that's awesome.
Was it number
possibly
one?
The worst revolver ever made?
Yeah. Was it number one? Was it number one? And do you still have it?
It was not number one, but now I do have number one of the RG revolver.
Oh, you do?
Nice.
Yeah, I do.
That gun is a cheap. No, it's not good. But,
no.
But
that's how you know it was true love.
At the time,
exactly.
when RGs came out, a Smith & Wesson was $140.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was $25.
Yeah.
And a lot of people couldn't afford $100+ for a gun, and they wanted to protect themselves.
And so it will usually go bang, and the bullet will usually go in the direction that it's pointed. So
yeah,
right. So
true.
It's better. I mean, so every gun serves a purpose.
Yeah.
We're struggling with that now. We don't like to carry certain brands of guns in our store. We are very careful about it. But you also have to make sure that you have a gun for every type of
price point. And
Yeah.
that kind of
Yeah.
thing. So with all of these millions of brand new gun owners, like Dan was saying, that while we're sitting in the studio, it's Monday, June 29th in the year 2020, and the COVID thing, whenever you're sitting and listening to this, it could be years later and you're like, I never even heard of COVID. I hope that's the case, right? But right now we are mired in it.
Yeah.
And there's civil unrest, and there's people wanting to defund the police, and there's people rioting in the streets. And it's been a bit crazy for the past few months. And so there are millions of Americans who for the first time have decided that they want to take that responsible step to be their own immediate responder. So gun stores, we've been very busy at AZ Firearms. Gun stores are a very good way to educate people, not only about the training, but also their constitutional rights and that sort of thing. But gun shows, you mentioned that earlier. Gun shows are another great avenue for people. And if you are like brand new to the whole idea, I mean, there are people out there that are feeling like they're having an out-of-body experience because they're like, the person who is never going to own one of these evil guns is now buying a gun. So the idea of walking into a gun show probably is going to feel like, I don't even know where they hold them. I don't know if you need a permit to go into one. You know what I mean? So talk to us a little bit about the etiquette of even, shopping at gun shows and what they're all about.
Cheryl, that is such a wonderful point. And I would encourage I bet you've got a lot of listeners and viewers who know gun shows very well. But for those of you who haven't gone to a gun show, do it. I've never known anybody who has gone to a gun show and not at least been entertained at the very least.
Yeah,
it's huge fun. It's huge fun. Concept of a gun show is a promoter rents a big venue and a bunch of individual people. Some of them are gun dealers, some of them are private collectors. They come and they rent a table or a row of tables, and they bring their guns or their firearms related products and have them for sale there. Now, gun show people, there's a so-called gun show loophole. Gun laws apply at gun shows just like they do anywhere else. So if you're buying from a dealer, you're going to have to do the paperwork. It's easy, it's simple. They can call in the check while you're there at the show, but you're going to see a lot of guns. The most important thing attending a gun show is remember your basic rules of gun safety. Just because everything's on display, and because it presumably has been load checked, doesn't mean you can disregard the basic firearm safety rules. Don't let your muzzle point at anyone. Keep your finger off the trigger. Don't work the action. That's important from a safety perspective, but that's also very important. On some collectible guns, you can do $100 worth of damage by dry firing at once.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And you have to be careful with that, Jim, because it's like we're told, if you touch a gun, check to make sure that it's empty.
That's a great point. You don't do that if you're at a guy's table who's selling commemorative guns. He puts a value on the fact that that action has never been worked.
Right.
And he will be distressed by the minute scratches that get on there from just load checking the gun. Now, I collect junk, so I don't care. But you touch also on a very important etiquette thing, and that is that you never touch a gun on a table unless you ask the table holder's permission first. That's
right.
Essentially important. And watch your kids. Do not let them go around fingering guns or other items on the table. They find a cool table full of bayonets. Don't let them go up and just start grabbing through them. Respect the table owner. Ask permission before you handle. Ask permission before you load check or do anything to the action of the firearm. And
if you can't load check the gun because the owner doesn't want you to, treat the gun as though it was loaded and do not point it at anyone. But you're right.
Especially important.
Right. And Jim, you're right. If you go up to somebody that has guns for sale and you look at a gun, you ask first to touch it, they're going to be more responsive to you if you show respect.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
they're going to, hey, they might even help you get a deal
Yeah.
because of being respectful.
Absolutely. And gun shows are not just flea markets. They are social events. They are political events. They're an important expression of free speech. You'll meet people you'll meet amazing and wonderful people there. You'll meet distressing people there. You'll meet fascinating people
But
there.
there's also that one weird guy there too.
That's
though,
what he
Tim.
means. Yeah.
Yeah, that's me, darn it.
Yeah, me too.
But it's a great time. You'll have fun. You'll be amazed at what's out there, and it's an event. It's a social event, and the price. If you set up at gun shows, I may be letting your secret out here, but the price marked on the gun is not necessarily the price that you will have to pay for it. This is like a rug bazaar. You're expected to haggle over these guns, and you will hear the phrases, "Oh, I've got more than that in it," or "I couldn't take less than." But that's a very hallowed tradition at gun shows is the back and forth bargaining.
You got to play. I started going to gun shows, selling at gun shows when I was 12.
Oh my gosh!
I had my own little table.
Because the laws were different. Let's clarify that for people. The laws were different back in
but it was
in the Stone Ages, whenever that was, honey.
Because people would, can you trade this gun? Is your dad going to be okay with it? And my dad would say he can do whatever he wants to.
That's great.
But the point is, I learned so much at a gun show. All these years of going to gun shows, you learn people, you learn business, you learn so many things. Plus, you can have a lot of fun with it.
Dan, that is such an important point because so much of the knowledge in gun collection is passed on person to person. And if you're new at this, odds are pretty good you're going to meet your mentor either at a gun show or in a gun collecting club. Which, if you get seriously interested in guns, you want to check out your local gun collecting club too. Or if you're a specialty collector, if you like Colts or Winchesters or Smith & Wessons, you want to check out that national brand name collector group too.
We've expanded AZ Firearms, and I have a room now, and we're in the process of getting this room built, but I have all my collector guns in there, machine guns and oddity guns and all that. And I can't wait I've opened it up a little bit, but I can't wait to fully open that place up just so people can ask questions.
Yeah.
Because
now on the weekends when there isn't a gun show, people need to go to AZ Firearms and ask to see the special room. That would be really, really cool.
There's some fun stuff in there, and the stuff has been sitting in my vault all these years, and I'm finally saying, you know what, that's not what I got it for. I want to show people. It's not to brag, but to give information and to let people see things that they probably have never seen before.
Yeah,
it's fun.
So true.
Well,
Jim, we need to start wrapping up, but we could. I know. We seriously could just keep talking all day. But I do want to give folks a chance to know how can they follow all the cool stuff that you're doing, your new position you mentioned, and also get their own copy of this big, beautiful coffee table, worthy book.
It's very kind of you to ask, and I am new enough to retirement that I don't have a lot of that set up. Later this fall, I will be opening the gunheritage.com website. I have negotiated and will probably reacquire my armchairgunshow.com website. When I have a web presence, all my different books will be available for sale on it, but probably I'm going to get back into occasional consignment sales of collectible guns and appraisals and consulting. People who need to get a hold of me can just contact me at my email. It's my name at outlook.com, Jim Supica, SUPICA @outlook.com. And to get that, I think that is a wonderful book. Obviously, I'm proud of it, and I'm proud of our staff who put it together. but they can get that obviously on Amazon.com. I am sure that at some point NRA is going to start selling it. I don't know if they have or not. You might even be able to talk Phil and Doug, who are still there at the museum, into sending you an autographed copy if you ask nicely in order from the NRA. So
I think we might be doing that.
Yes.
good, good.
So I love it. Well, thank you so much for all you do, Jim. The knowledge is so important, to pass the knowledge forward. So, museums, it's another thing that let's get back together on this show and talk more about how important museums are to helping people know what came before, and removing the politicization. Ooh, that's a hard word. Easy for me
Yeah.
to say. Off of the items themselves, and understanding more about the technology and the artwork and the beauty and the time frame and what was going on in the world when these items were made. That knowledge is so vital to our future. So thank you for
Well,
helping carry
thank you
that
for those
forward.
kind words, and right back at you. Thank you for the great work that you guys are doing with Gun Freedom Radio.
Thank you.
I hope folks have seen that promotional clip that I got to take a look at. It's a wonderful, wonderful attitude about firearms. I wish everybody involved in guns in the country had that kind of attitude and the kind of skills to present that. So thank you guys for what you're doing. You're doing great work.
Thank you very much. Thank
I
you.
appreciate that, Jim. All right. Well, we're definitely going to be reaching back out and asking you to come back on so we can talk some more. So I hope you'll come.
Oh, absolutely.
Thanks, Jim.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Jim.
Wow.
And
That
the ad that he's talking about, I'm so complimented that Jim likes it.
Yes.
We had a 2 video ads produced by Abigail Hall. She's an awesome videographer and storyteller. And the one that he's talking about that I sent to him is, it's really the family. We're a family-owned gun store, and we really portray that it's about, we help you protect what you love, and that's basically the theme of this this ad. And so often it's about the the tough guy kind of attitude, and
No, you know what it is so often? About money.
oh, sometimes
It's mostly about money. And it's not, as you get older and you start learning things, you realize, no, it's not all about money.
yeah.
I mean, firearms is it's not a privilege, it's a right.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a lot of responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't continue to teach that, then we're going to lose it all.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to teach responsibility, and perfect examples that's at our gun shop. So our commercials need to show that we hold that responsibility.
That's true. And then we did, Abigail used a lot of the same footage, but then put like this high energy driving music behind it, and kind of showed the fun stuff about guns. Or just, such a selection, kind of like Jim Supica's book. It's kind of like a little bit of everything that we have at AZ Firearms. But
like I said,
I will post those on the Gun Freedom Radio Facebook page. So
like I said, the only thing this book is missing, besides his autograph, is a little check mark so that you can check off all the guns you own and the ones you want to get, and a wish list on the back page, so that when you want something, what do you want for Christmas? You have everything. I want this. There it is. It's on page 47.
I'm so afraid. So
It's
how we
just,
always say, pray for our nation and pray for everybody. Pray for my budget.
it's just one more gun, Joe.
Oh my
Just one more.
stars. Yeah. Well, again, it's so important to remember our history, because when we don't know it, it's too easy for people to fool us into saying ridiculous things and voting for ridiculous things. And a museum and a book like this, it's a beautiful and non-threatening place and a way to just start opening your mind and just saying, okay, I don't have to agree with this to look at it, right? And then just start, reading about it, and you might find a new appreciation for it.
Yeah, you might not agree with the 1955 Chevy that's low ride or souped up or whatever, but that doesn't mean that somebody doesn't appreciate it.
Right.
Let
Right.
people have free minds to appreciate it.
Yeah, that's a true thing. I mean, we don't let them, right?
Right.
Because that's permission, but that's a
Yeah.
whole different thing. All right, we've got to get out of here.
It was
Oh,
fun to do a
golly.
fun show.
Yes.
This was fun. It was like fun.
Yes.
There was no like threats or worries or
Yes.
it was all talking about fun.
I know you wanted me to really like go and excuse myself so the two of you could just have the floor to yourselves, right?
Were you even here?
Barely.
I'm sorry.
Barely.
I
I was the other guy today.
Yeah.
Right. I was the
Anyway,
interloper into your love affair conversation with Jim and
Jim,
all
thank
these
you
great
again for
guns.
that. It was great.
For sure. And so thank you so much to our awesome listeners. Truly, the conversations we have are important, but when you take them around your dinner tables and into your carpools, if we're doing that nowadays, who knows, because of COVID, or whatever, your chat rooms, your Zoom conversations, when you take the ideas that we talk about beyond just going into your own earbuds or watching one of the YouTube videos that we put up, that is invaluable. Truly, your time is your most finite resource. And when you spend it with us, we sure don't hate that.
I need to take my truck to a carpool. It's really dirty right now. I was going to yesterday, but there was a minor accident and there was a donkey on the road.
No, I'm not laughing at that.
Why did they say minor accident?
I don't know. It's not about mining.
I know. That's what I'm thinking. What's a minor with a donkey doing on the freeway?
Bad dad jokes by Dan.
Okay.
Todd.
I'm just curious.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Let's pray for our
Thank
bad
you.
dad
Well, I
jokes.
also want to thank Jim because he's awesome. Thank you for the time you spent with us. And now, who are we going to pray for? Think about it. Clock's ticking.
Our nation, our world.
I look like it hurt a little bit.
No,
Is that painful?
Pray for our world.
Pray for our world. Pray for our nation. Pray for our leaders, our representatives.
All of them?
All of them, Dan. Even the ones you don't like.
Do you think we can get them changed?
We just pray for them and let God sort it out, right?
Okay.
Especially pray for the ones you don't like. That main one that comes to mind. Pray
How
for
come
that
there's,
one.
you know what? There is one. How come it's always that one? I mean, it's.
I don't know, because there's
just,
always another election, and maybe that one will move on down the line.
You don't. Have you ever tried to get glue off of wood? Okay, you can't. It's deep in the grain, right?
I'm scared you're right about that. But anyway,
San Francisco, please help them. But pray for them. Pray for San Francisco.
You're getting the hang of it. I love it.
Nancy Drew. No, not Nancy. Nancy. Anyway, pray for them.
Be good to each other. Have a great week. And God bless.
Goodbye.